Jim had always thought of himself as a pretty ordinary guy. He didn't aspire to greatness, didn't long for fame or glory. He was just a janitor on a giant space station, orbiting a war-torn world that had seen more than its fair share of bloodshed. He cleaned up messes. It was a good gig, though a little lonely. The other races stationed here, mostly soldiers or diplomats, weren't exactly warm and fuzzy. But that was fine. He wasn't here for friendship. He was here for peacekeeping, a term he still didn't fully understand. Today was no different. The cafeteria was packed with beings of all shapes, sizes, and temperaments, most of them far too focused on their own business to notice a lone human mopping the floor in the corner. Jim didn't mind. He liked being invisible. It meant he didn't have to make small talk with the Arcturian diplomat who always talked about intergalactic unity while sipping his overpriced synthetic wine, or the Zorvani soldier who grunted every time he walked past. But today, something was different. A small figure sat at the farthest table in the corner. It wasn't just that the child was alone, which in itself wasn't unusual on this station. It was the way they sat, almost motionless, as if trying to fade into the shadows. The child's appearance was odd by human standards: long, silvery limbs, skin a pale shade of violet, and large, wide eyes that reflected the dim cafeteria lights with an almost uncanny intensity. Jim paused mid-mop, eyeing the child. Something about them seemed out of place, even among the usual assortment of alien species. They were no older than 6 or 7 by human reckoning, but their silence was unsettling. It was as though they carried a weight that Jim, in all his years of cleaning, couldn't quite comprehend. He took a step closer, wiping his brow as he did. "Hey there, kid. You all right?" he asked, leaning against the table with the mop resting in his hand. The child didn't respond at first. They just stared at the plate of food in front of them, pushing a spoon around without lifting it to their mouth. Jim sighed. He didn't know much about aliens, but he'd seen enough lonely kids on Earth to know when one needed a little help. "Not hungry?" he asked, taking a seat across from the child without waiting for an invitation. "I've got some leftover sandwich from lunch. It's not much, but, well, you know how it is." The child's eyes flicked up at him, but they didn't say a word. Jim shrugged and, with a grunt, pulled a sandwich from his bag, breaking it in half and sliding one half across the table. The child stared at it, their silvery fingers brushing against the edge of the plate. Then, after a long moment, they took it, tentatively at first, then more assuredly. "Better than nothing, right?" Jim said, leaning back in his chair. "I'm Jim, by the way. I mop up, clean the place, you know? Nothing fancy. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm your guy." The child chewed slowly, still silent, their gaze flickering to the door as a group of Zorvani soldiers walked past. Jim followed their line of sight, nodding. "Yeah, they're probably thinking, what's a janitor doing talking to an important kid like you?" he said, chuckling under his breath. "But hey, I just mop. Can't expect them to be too interested in that." To his surprise, the child made a faint sound, like a soft hum, almost imperceptible. Jim's eyebrows shot up. He wasn't sure if it was an actual attempt at communication, or just a child humming absent-mindedly as they finished the sandwich. "Well, it's a start," he muttered to himself. He stood up to leave, his mop at the ready, but as he turned to go, he heard it, a voice, small and fragile. "Thank you." Jim froze. He hadn't expected the child to speak. Their voice was soft, with a melodic quality that was almost soothing. He looked back at the child, who was now staring at him intently, the half-eaten sandwich still in their hand. The quiet seemed to hang in the air between them, a moment of connection that felt oddly profound. "No problem," Jim said, his voice suddenly feeling a bit hoarse. He gave a nod before heading back to the janitor's closet, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The rest of the day was routine. Jim cleaned. The station was busy as ever. He tried not to think about the child, but every so often, the image of those wide eyes and that soft "thank you" resurfaced in his mind. What was it about that kid? Who were they really? And why had they been alone in the cafeteria? That night, as Jim made his rounds, he noticed something odd. A group of soldiers had gathered near the docking bay, whispering among themselves with an urgency he hadn't seen before. He overheard snippets of their conversation. Something about an incident. Something about an important figure. But the words didn't make sense to him. "Hey, Jace." Jim called, spotting one of the station's techs leaning against the wall, casually scanning his data pad. "What's all this about?" Jace glanced up, his eyes narrowing. "Something's off, man. The Emperor's soldiers are circling like vultures. They're asking for access to the diplomatic chamber. No one knows why, though." Jim frowned. The Emperor's soldiers? He'd seen them before, towering, intimidating figures in their dark armor, far too serious for their own good. They rarely interacted with the common folk. The fact that they were making demands now only fueled his curiosity. But then, like a shot of adrenaline, it hit him. The child. He tried to shake off the thought. It couldn't be connected. Could it? The next morning, Jim was back in the cafeteria, mopping the floors as usual, when he saw it. The child was there again, sitting at the same table, staring at their plate of food with that same distant look in their eyes. This time, though, there was something different. The air was charged with an unmistakable tension. As Jim reached for his mop, he noticed a group of soldiers gathering near the entrance, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Their presence felt like a declaration of intent. The child looked up briefly, meeting Jim's eyes with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Jim wondered if they somehow knew what was about to happen. And then the door slid open. The soldiers stepped aside. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, regal alien, draped in ceremonial robes, with a crown that shimmered like stardust. The Emperor's envoy. Jim's heart skipped a beat. The door slid shut behind the envoy, and the entire cafeteria fell silent. Jim's breath caught in his throat as he stood frozen in place. All around him, the murmurs grew louder. The Emperor's soldiers weren't here for the usual peacekeeping nonsense. They were here for the child. And for Jim. A week had passed since Jim had shared that sandwich. And now, the Emperor's soldiers were waiting at the gate. The atmosphere aboard the station shifted overnight. The Emperor's envoy had arrived, and the tension that followed was palpable. Word spread quickly. An emergency meeting was called, and everyone, from the lowliest technician to the highest-ranking diplomat, could feel the gravity of the situation. Jim didn't understand at all, but the ripple of unease reached even his corner of the station. He leaned against his mop, staring at the newly arrived soldiers. They were everywhere, silent, imposing, a reminder that they represented more than just a military force. They were the Emperor's personal guard, a symbol of absolute power. Jim felt a chill crawl down his spine. He had no idea why the Emperor's people would be interested in him. His only interaction had been a quiet moment with an alien child, the kind of thing he did without thinking. But now, standing in the shadow of the Emperor's soldiers, the weight of his actions started to settle in. A sudden, sharp beep echoed through the hall, signaling the arrival of an urgent message. The doors to the command center slid open, and Captain Marla Thorne, leader of the human contingent on the station, stepped out. Her posture was rigid. Her face set an expression that brooked no argument. Marla was the kind of leader who inspired respect, even fear. But beneath her tough exterior, Jim knew she wasn't immune to stress. "Jim, come with me," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. Marla didn't waste time with pleasantries. She led Jim through the corridors, past the bustling military and diplomatic personnel. Her pace was brisk, her eyes scanning every corner as though expecting an ambush at any moment. Jim struggled to keep up, his mop clanking against the walls as they moved. Inside the briefing room, Marla's team was already gathered. Dr. Kalek, Tess, and Jace. Kalek, with his unruly hair and the faint hum of an energy shield generator strapped to his belt, was already hunched over a data pad, reading something with a furrowed brow. Tess, ever the optimist, sat in the corner, sketching something in her notebook. Jace, as usual, leaned back in his chair with a half-smirk, arms crossed. "Everyone's here," Marla said, closing the door behind her. She turned to face the group. "Let's get down to it. We're in hot water." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's an understatement. I was just watching the soldiers outside. Looks like the Emperor's about to make a house call." Marla's eyes flicked to Jim, who stood awkwardly by the door, unsure if he should sit or stay standing. "We've got a problem," she continued, her tone harder than usual. "It's about the child. The one Jim gave leftovers to." She let that hang in the air for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle in. Kalek looked up, his expression impassive. The child was important, but I didn't realize how important. I've been looking into their background, and it seems they're not just some random kid. They're the Emperor's heir. There was a beat of stunned silence. Tessa's eyes widened. The Emperor's heir? But they were just sitting in the cafeteria. They didn't seem... Seem is the key word here, Marla interrupted. Whoever this child is, their presence here was no accident. And your little act of kindness, Jim, she paused, as if searching for the right words. It's caused an international incident. The Emperor's forces want answers. Jim rubbed the back of his neck, feeling like he'd just stepped into a nightmare. I didn't mean anything by it. I just gave the kids some leftover food. I didn't know they were, he trailed off, his words feeling hollow. How could he have known? How could anyone? Kalek adjusted his glasses and glanced back at his datapad. From what I've gathered, the child's presence on this station was supposed to be kept secret. The Emperor's forces are here now because they believe Jim's actions have insulted the heir, an unprecedented violation of protocol. They think he's undermined the heir's dignity. Jim winced. He'd heard of protocol violations in the military, but this felt different. It wasn't just paperwork. It wasn't just a matter of broken rules. The child wasn't just anyone. They were the Emperor's flesh and blood, and he had fed them a sandwich. "We don't have much time," Marla said, turning her attention to Jace, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. "Jace, you're our best shot at getting any real intel on the Emperor's plans. We need to know what's really going on and why this child is so important. You're going to have to get on that shuttle and find out." Jason crossed his arms, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Thought you'd never ask. I'm already planning my escape route. You know I work best when I'm on my own." Dr. Kalek raised a hand. "This is no time for your usual tricks, Jace. We need to approach this with care. If we provoke the Emperor's forces, this station will become a battlefield." Tess spoke up, her voice gentle but filled with a hopeful tone. "I know this sounds impossible, but maybe we can talk to the Emperor's envoy. Maybe they'll listen to us. Peace is still possible, right? If they see we understand the gravity of the situation, maybe they'll back off." Marla's eyes softened for just a moment. Tessa's idealism was a refreshing change of pace, but Marla knew better than to trust in optimism alone. "I'd love to believe that, Tess. But the Emperor doesn't negotiate over food. This is about power, about control." Jim shifted uncomfortably, his fingers gripping his mop as if it were some kind of lifeline. "So what's the plan, then? Do we just sit here and wait for them to start blowing stuff up?" Marla gave him a sharp look. "You'll follow the plan, Jim. This isn't about you or me. It's about saving the station. And if that means playing by their rules, we'll play." She turned to Dr. Kalek, who had been silently calculating something on his pad. "Can we send a message to the Emperor's forces? Something to stall them, at least?" Kalek nodded slowly. "I can try. It won't be easy. Their communication systems are heavily encrypted, but I'll give it a shot." Jace raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine. I'll play nice, too. But when it all goes sideways, I'm taking the exit first." Jim stared at the group, still reeling from the shock of the past 24 hours. The Emperor's soldiers weren't here for diplomacy. They weren't here to make nice. They were here for answers, and Jim was the one who had started it all. Marla leaned in, her voice low but steady. "We need to act fast. The Emperor's envoy is waiting at the gates. If we don't resolve this, the situation will escalate beyond anything we can control." Jim felt the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He'd been a janitor, a nobody, an invisible presence on the station. But now, he was caught in the middle of something much bigger than himself. And the only thing he could do was follow the team's lead. They were his only chance. He took a deep breath, gripped the mop one last time, and nodded. "All right, let's do this." And with that, they left the room to face whatever the Emperor's envoy would bring next. The voice from the console had silenced the room. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Someone or something had been waiting. As Nia, Jax, Lena, and Rowan exchanged tense looks, the palpable weight of the unknown settled over them. They had come to this planet for answers, but now they realized the true cost of the curiosity. The planet itself was not a passive entity. It was alive in ways they couldn't comprehend, and it wasn't about to let them leave unscathed. Jax was the first to react, his instincts kicking in as he darted toward the nearest control panel. His fingers moved with frantic precision, tapping into the system's old codes, trying to shut off the eerie, distorted voice. "We've got to find the source of this," he muttered. "Whatever's talking to us, it's not just a message, it's a trap." "I think we've already walked right into it," Rowan said, his voice a low growl. He stood near the exit, eyes scanning the darkened corridors beyond. "And I don't think we're alone anymore." Nia's stomach tightened. The monolith hummed louder now, its pulse syncing with her heartbeat. She could feel it in her bones, that instinctual tug that something was shifting beneath them. This place was a death trap from the start. "We need to move." But just as they turned to retreat, the walls of the chamber groaned. The ground beneath them shifted with a violent tremor. Lena gasped, her hand flying to the nearest support column as the floor cracked open in jagged lines. "We're not going anywhere," Nia said, voice steady despite the growing chaos. She turned to the team, eyes sharp. "Everyone stick together. There's more to this place than we thought." Without waiting for a response, Nia grabbed a flashlight from her gear and led the way, moving cautiously through the newly formed fissures in the floor. The dim light from the monolith barely illuminated their surroundings as they pressed forward, each step feeling heavier, as though the planet itself was weighing them down. Behind them, the hum of the monolith became a low, guttural rumble, resonating through the air. Suddenly, a shrill screech pierced the quiet, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping across metal. Lena whirled around, her face pale. Did anyone else hear that? Before Nia could respond, the ground shook violently again, and a massive creature, its outline barely visible in the gloom, burst in the cracks in the walls. It was a grotesque hybrid of bone and muscle, its body heaving with unnatural energy. Its eyes glowed faintly, and rows of jagged teeth gleamed in the dim light. Rowan's hand was on his sidearm in an instant, but Nia held up a hand, stopping him. "Not yet," she ordered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before we fight it." The creature let out another deafening screech, charging forward. Lena's eyes widened in terror, but Nia's mind was already calculating the odds. "Fall back," she barked. "Get to the hallway. Now!" The team sprinted toward the exit as the creature lunged, its massive limbs tearing to the floor in pursuit. Jax cursed under his breath, tossing a small grenade toward the creature. The explosion rocked the chamber, but the creature barely flinched, its body reforming in an unsettling way as the damage seemed to mend itself. "We're dealing with something alive here," Nia said, her voice grim. "Something that isn't bound by the rules of biology. It's evolving in real time." "Just great," Rowan muttered, the sarcasm not quite hiding the edge of fear in his tone. "Not only is the planet trying to kill us, it's doing it with the kind of things nightmares are made of." As they reached the hallway, Nia's mind raced. The creature was too powerful, too resilient. They couldn't fight it with weapons. They needed another plan. Lena, ever the optimist, grabbed her arm, her eyes alight with strange excitement. "What if we use it? What if we can reverse engineer its biology? We've seen these creatures evolve on the fly. What if we can learn from that?" Nia's brow furrowed. "Learn how to become the creature?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "No. Learn how to adapt to the environment, like they did. Maybe we can turn this to our advantage," Lena pressed. "There's a way to make this work. We're not completely powerless here." "Powerless?" Rowan scoffed. "We're being chased by a genetically engineered nightmare. How do you propose we just adapt?" Before Nia could mediate the brewing tension between the two, another screech echoed from the chamber behind them, followed by the sickening sound of the creature's claws scraping across the walls, drawing closer. There wasn't time to argue. "No more talking," Nia commanded. "We need to get to the control room. If this thing's using the planet's systems to regenerate, then we need to find its core. We disrupt that, and we disrupt the creature. Jax nodded, his face hardening as he checked his weapon. Got it. Let's move fast. As they ran down the narrow, twisting corridors, they began to understand just how vast the complex beneath the surface was. It was more than just a settlement. It was an entire system, built into the very bones of the planet. The deeper they went, the more it felt like they were descending into the belly of some ancient, sleeping beast. The walls pulsed with an eerie energy, and each step they took seemed to awaken something. The air grew colder, heavier, and their breaths became labored. Suddenly, the corridor split and a massive, circular door opened with a low, mechanical hum. Nia's eyes locked onto the symbol above the doorway, the same marking they had seen earlier on the ruins. This was it. This is the heart of it, Nia said, her voice filled with resolve. This is where it started. Whatever we're facing, it's all connected to this place. But as the door slid open, a new threat materialized. From the darkness within, a figure stepped forward, a human silhouette, but distorted, as though it had been fused with the technology around it. The figure's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and a voice, clearer this time, rang out from the shadows. You should not have come. Nia's heart hammered in her chest. They weren't just facing the planet's creations anymore. They were facing the very people who had once called this world home. And they were no longer human. We were never meant to be, the figure continued, its voice calm yet laced with an unsettling hunger. We evolved just as the world did. And now you will too. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside. The figure stepped closer, its movements fluid, almost unnatural. The once human form before them was no longer bound by flesh as they knew it. The eyes, glowing with an eerie, predatory light, locked onto Nia with unsettling precision. She could feel the weight of its gaze, not just as a threat, but as a promise of what they might become if they failed to escape. We were never meant to be, the figure repeated, its voice now clearer, tinged with an almost reverent finality. We adapted. We survived. The words were spoken like a mantra, as though each syllable had been carved into the very core of the world itself. Nia's pulse quickened, but her mind stayed sharp. She had seen too much. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was a warning, a reminder that this planet wasn't merely deadly. It was evolving, reshaping its inhabitants in ways no one could have anticipated. What happened here? Nia demanded, her voice firm. She wasn't about to let fear take hold. If she was going to find answers, she needed the truth. The figure's lips twisted into a grim smile, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the kind of smile someone gave when they were speaking to someone they knew would never fully understand. You think you can survive by brute force? This world doesn't care about your strength. It changes you, whether you want it or not. Jax's hand gripped his weapon, but Nia raised a hand to stop him. She needed to understand what they were dealing with. Who are you? She asked, her voice measured. Who are you now? The figure chuckled softly, a sound that echoed in the cavernous room. It was as though the very air had absorbed the laughter, reverberating in a sickening chorus. I was once like you, it said. Human, before the planet reshaped me. Now I am something else. Something more. Something better. Lena, standing behind Nia, shuddered at the figure's words. Better? She asked, her voice trembling. You become a monster. The figure's gaze flickered to Lena, and for a moment, Nia saw something akin to pity in its eyes. Monster? The figure repeated, as though tasting the word. No, child. I am the evolution of mankind. I am the result of what happens when you stop resisting the world around you and embrace it. This world gave me strength. It gave me life. And now it offers the same to you. A low rumble vibrated through the floor beneath them. The monolith hummed again, its pulse now in sync with the figure's words, as if the entire structure was alive, responding to its presence. The air around them seemed to warp, growing thicker, the walls trembling with a low vibration. Nia narrowed her eyes, realizing they were running out of time. She had to make a choice, and fast. You're telling me this thing, this monstrosity, is what humanity has become? She couldn't hold back the disgust in her voice. The notion of surrendering to the planet, of losing oneself to the very forces they had come to explore, was too much to accept. I didn't lose myself, the figure said, its tone now sharp, cutting to the tension in the air. I found a new self, a stronger one. We found it in the heart of this planet. And now, you will join us, or you will perish, just like the others. The last word hung heavy in the air, and Nia felt the full weight of its meaning. They weren't the first to arrive on this forsaken planet. There had been others before them, explorers, colonists, maybe even whole expeditions that had made the same mistake, coming here, believing they could conquer it. But the planet didn't yield. It changed them as it was changing them now, and in the end it consumed them. We didn't come here to become like you, Nia said, her voice unwavering. We came here to understand, to learn, to find out what happened. The figure's smile grew wider, almost cruel. You think you can walk away from this? From the truth? It motioned toward the darkened walls, which seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural light. This is the future. You can't fight it. This world is your future. You're already too far gone. Nia's hand hovered over her communicator, but she hesitated. She had come here with a mission, with the hope of discovering something new, something that could advance humanity's understanding of the universe. But she hadn't expected this. A warning from those who had already lost themselves, had already crossed a line between human and something else, something dangerous. The figure's voice broke through her thoughts, softer now. You're not like us yet, it said, but you will be. You must be. Suddenly, the walls around them seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, and Nia felt the unmistakable pressure of something closing in on them. The very floor beneath their feet seemed to tremble with anticipation. She turned to the others, eyes sharp. Get ready, she said, voice low and urgent. I think the planet's decided it wants us to stay. Before they could react, the monolith in the center of the room erupted with a deafening screech. A wave of energy shot out from it, a pulse that crackled through the room, sending waves of force into the walls. The air warped, shifting in response, and the temperature spiked, growing unbearably hot. Lena stumbled back, her hands up to shield herself. What is happening? Nia's mind raced as she watched the figure in front of them, its body beginning to pulse with the same unnatural glow as the monolith. It was merging with the planet, as if the world itself was fusing with its mind. And suddenly, Nia understood this was the final stage of evolution, not just a physical change, but a merging of mind, body, and planet, a fusion that had allowed these beings to survive. But as the room began to close in on them, Nia knew they were running out of time. The world was going to consume them. The question wasn't whether they would survive. It was whether they could escape before they became part of the death world itself. We need to get out of here, Nia said, her voice tight with determination. Now. But the figure's laughter echoed behind them as they ran, the sound growing louder with each step. You can't escape, it called after them. You're already one of us. The walls trembled once more, the rumble of the earth rising to a deafening crescendo. And in that moment, Nia realized, the real fight had just begun.